My video presentation is on the book entitled Education and the Occult of Efficiency by Raymond E. Callahan. The author of the book begins by giving the history of the efficiency movement at the beginning of the century, about 1900. By this time, education had made great strides, at least by 1900s, although there were a lot of problems that still needed to be worked out. If you were a white student and wanted to work hard, you could get a good education and probably get some great training for a future. It was during this period also that the business and industry, all of those things were having great success. And because of this, society began to look at the businessmen as leaders. Those who were successful in business were usually, you could find them on any committee or boards, and the people were looking up to them as their leaders. And naturally, because they were successful in business, they had great influence on our educational system. Schools were being compared with business and industry, and we find that schoolmen who had once considered themselves as scholars were now identifying themselves as successful business executives. It was around 1910 that America became enamored with a new idea that was known as scientific management, or the Taylor system. Frederick Taylor was one who became very influential in increasing the production in many industries by using scientific management, which was a system to study the workings of a business or an industry and eliminate unnecessary waste, unnecessary movements, and long periods of idleness. And one of the places that he studied and did his work was at Bethlehem Steel, where he was able to use this system to increase the amount of work that was produced. Before him, when he began his studies watching the people, he saw that each man was bringing in loading in a boxcar about 12.5 tons of pig iron, and using his system, his calculations, everything, he was able to produce, to increase that production to about 47 tons per day that each man. It came with more work, though, from each individual. They were required to do things. But with that success, we find that the Taylor system showed and proved that it could eliminate waste and increase production, and it soon was being applied to other areas, the military, other areas, even the home. And about 1911 through 1913, there criticism of the school system seemed to be increasing all the time because it was, as they said, inefficient, and it was wasting tax dollars and needed to become more efficient. And it is here that around this time that the experiment with scientific management began to work its way into the educational system. Scientific management became the major topic at every educational meeting, and the speakers would be presenting other topics, but it seemed like everybody wanted to hear what was going to be said about scientific management and how it could be applied into the education. It seemed to get more and more support, and became probably in their minds the cure-all for any and all problems of inefficient education systems. Many of the superintendents and education experts began to devise their their own systems that they would push on the schools, and they had a lot of support from the community because they did want to see the schools become as efficient as the industries, and believe that what was applied in the industry could naturally be applied in the school systems. Well, we know, it became a very damaging thing to the school system. It was a trial and error thing. Teachers who were professionally educated to be educators were now spending more and more time on the paperwork that was required for this system, and it moved not just with the teachers, but in every area. It even reached into the janitors to have them become more efficient. So all people were feeling the effects of these demands, and from about 1910 to 1930, it caused educational goals that were once set up to become sacrificed on the altar of scientific management. Class sizes increased, and the teachers were being overloaded with responsibilities. They had to continue to keep up with all of their paperwork. There were forms that had to be filled out. And the same things were being felt by the superintendents. After 1930, opposition began to come from educators themselves. They realized that this was not working out, and students had become more than a unit, no more than a unit. They were looking at a product as just, this is how much we can get out. Students could pretty much make it through if they, just by showing up in the colleges and other areas. It affected every area of education. People like Jesse Newland and George Counts spoke out against this, and that their opposition and opposition of other leaders, coupled with the Depression, or the Great Depression, seemed to help reduce the extreme overemphasis of business and industrial management in education, educational management. But even though the reins were pulled back and people began to realize this wasn't working, it still had its effect on it that can be felt today. And I believe that any time that we require schools to become more efficient, and people from outside the education department begin to meddle and push things, I think we have problems. And the author believes so too. He called it the cult of efficiency. It tells us a lot about what he felt in this. So although the reins were pulled back and kind of under control, it's still being felt today. Today, the same pressures are there, and I believe that there's always going to be the pressure from the public to do a better job. I always hear it: I pay your wages, and you need to do a better job. Hopefully, we can do a better job. There is always the need to be careful how we spend our money, but I think it can become the focus, and we forget what we're doing, and that is to educate our youth.